Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, people. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome back to this month's book lounge. And what a book that we've got in store. Allahu Akbar. The Joy of Pain, people. The Joy of Pain. Let me just bring the title up before you once again so you can take a look at that. All right, so taking it to our esteemed panel. Let me just bring up our panelists. Ahlan wa sahlan, people. Ahlan wa sahlan. All right, welcome back. So, just want to welcome you all. We've got Ibn Firnas, Mustaqim, Thakira, Scorpio, and Fazila. Ahlan wa sahlan. Guys, this month's book, long awaited, well overdue, and very relevant. The Joy of Pain. First of all, let's just get in there with what are our thoughts about this book, and then we can follow it through with some of the themes and how it's actually very such a timely topic. So, yeah, let's take it away, guys. What are your thoughts about this book this month? Ibn Firnas,
Yeah,
how do you feel?
it's an interesting topic and it's quite relevant, especially at this time, what's happening around the world. Uh, and it does show you human development, how we develop feelings and how we respond to these feelings and act upon them. So I found it interesting that it showed these feelings in different scenarios. Some of the examples were interesting where we never gave thought if this existed or not. And it is a talking point in question because it is connecting to a lot of, um, I would say, your upbringing, your society you live in, the knowledge you gain, and obviously the friends you have, and how you travel through this life.
Okay, so the joy of pain. Yeah, this is definitely
Life
something
is
very relevant. What about Mustaqim? What are your thoughts, man? What do you think of the book
Uh,
overall?
oh, it was a good book, but I will admit it was kind of uncomfortable to come face to face with the fact that we have this feeling within us as well. But then after going through the book, you come to see that it's nothing to be ashamed about. I mean, we all get angry, we all get sad, we all get happy. So the fact that we have some Schadenfreude in us is not necessarily something that we have to be embarrassed about. A little complaint I had with the book, if you can even call it that, was that he really doesn't dedicate much time to saying how we can deal with Schadenfreude, or maybe how we can express it in a positive way, except for like towards the very end of the book. But then I read the other book as well by Tiffany Smith, which has a similar title, I believe.
Yeah,
So that one, yeah, that one towards the end, it takes a bit of a, it's kind of like a summarized version of the one we're talking about right now. But that one towards the end talks about, we all have this within us, and it shouldn't be about trying to necessarily get rid of it, but just like any other emotion, when you feel it, what is it telling you? And then that's when
yeah.
you go back to the content of the book, which I'm sure we'll discuss. Is it because you're suffering from some sort of trauma? What did you go through? Or what sort of in group, out group dynamics are at play? So that really took the cake for me.
Yeah. Right, ladies. Fazila, your thoughts? What did you think first? This book as a selection, going through it, your thoughts?
The book was interesting. It made you feel like just like um, one of the persons said that it made you a little uncomfortable thinking that we all have this dark side of us. So that part was interesting. The first half was very interesting actually, but then it becomes repetitive. Like it has so many examples, way too many examples. Sometimes it feels like, okay, I get it now. No need of more examples, but yeah, like, yeah, I get it. So, okay, I feel happiness in someone else's misfortune, but yeah, in the end, it takes the whole Abraham Lincoln route. So I kind of didn't get it, but it's like, okay.
What about Scorpio? What about you with the book?
Yeah, I liked the examples, like how they used like contemporary books and like TV shows and stuff like that to drive home the point. But like Mustaqim said, I do wish they had spent more time discussing like how we can recognize the Schadenfreude in within ourselves and sort of how to combat that. I do know that they were talking about, just being aware of it does a lot to help you, and being aware of like the in-group out-group dynamics and what kind of factors go into it definitely help. But overall, I liked the book. I liked how they also broke it down into different like categories of Schadenfreude, Freude, because initially when you announced the book, I was like, well, I associated it more with the envy kind. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I feel that much. But I realized as I kept reading that there's like a lot in sports, in TV, in politics. So I liked how they had different examples of the kinds and categories of Schadenfreude as opposed to just the one that might come to everyone's head.
Yeah, no, and the envy thing, we'll come back to that because it does show that the whole topic is kind of very interlocked with envy. Zakira, what about yourself? Your thoughts? Share them with us
Uh,
on this
I,
book
I,
of pain and its joys.
I very much enjoyed the book. I thought it was a nice, easy read, and there was a flow to it. In terms of the what you say repetitiveness, I thought it was just the different layers that that is unpacked in this book. So how envy is actually different from jealousy, and how they manifest itself. The book, for me, not even in terms of what's happening around the world, but it forced you to introspect on yourself, and it was a bit like like Moss says, uncomfortable, because you have to catch yourself saying, do I do that? Do I pass that judgment sometimes? I think that was one of the deep questions that I asked, because I heard it once, that if something bad happens to somebody that you like, then you're like, oh shame, they're being tested. But if something bad happens to somebody that you don't like, then you're like, oh, see, they're being punished. Like, who are we to sit and pass that judgment? So there was definitely
So true, so true. I thought, first of all, the term, just starting with the actual word Schadenfreude, that in English, not even having a word for this, it's something which that finding pleasure in the misery of others. In Arabic, they actually have a word, shumata, which is the exact same thing as Schadenfreude. So, and it's used actually in the word appears as well in the Quran, that la tushmit bi al-a'da, that Harun says to Moses when he's kind of rebuking him. When Moses is rebuking Harun, so Harun responds, la tushmit bi al-a'da. Basically, don't make people take pleasure in this misery, like you're telling me off and it's making people happy. So it is a word in Arabic, but I think actually, I mean, it'd be interesting. He doesn't go into how many languages around the world actually have a word for it, but it would be interesting to see whether the major languages, like I don't think Urdu would have a word for it either. And I would assume maybe most languages don't actually to have a word for, and maybe that's something to do with our being ashamed of it, that we don't even have a word for it. You can't even, because first of all, you've got to identify the problem. to realize it is a problem.
Mhm.
So yeah, and what? Yeah,
Sorry, Mufti, I wanted to, in the last, towards the ending, when the author spoke about envy, to my mind, the only similar concept that I had heard about was like the concept of hasad.
yeah,
People
yeah,
describe when hasad is described, like you, it's different from jealousy. It's like you want what the other person has, and you don't want them to have it as well.
yeah, yeah,
So that was the only like kind of similarity that
yeah.
I had
Yeah, no,
for previous
that
concepts.
has. You're right. Envy does exist in all communities,
Mhm.
uh, and I think envy. I think most communities would have a word for envy. That kind, like you said, hasad, for example, or jealousy, which is, I suppose, somewhat. It's like a spectrum, and people would definitely have words for that. I think finding pleasure in the misfortune of someone,
Mhm.
a lot of languages don't have that word, I assume, because I mean, I don't know of it in any, apart from Arabic and English borrowing it from German. So it was fascinating. You see, I tell you, just following on from some of your thoughts, like Mustaqim said, that look, I found it uncomfortable. I tell you, in some ways, I completely echo that sentiment. But in some ways, I found it almost relieving as well that you're kind of being told that look, everybody experiences this, but they just don't own up to it, and most people will find any excuse. They'll accept anything but this. Like they will say, like people will not accept that they are actually taking pleasure in people's miseries. They will say no, no, it's something else, or no, they deserve it, or no, they. I'm just trying to be just. I'm trying to be a fair person. I'm trying to be. And I actually found that quite comforting to when they explained that look, this is actually everyone, but people just won't own up to it. So if you can in yourself ever recognize it, then it makes you in many ways a better person, because you can recognize that look, I'm actually feeling a bit of schadenfreude here. Like I'm actually, you know what, like I'm being a bit cruel. Like I'm actually happy that the person is a bit messed up. And I think even recognizing that, it's it makes you, puts you in a better position, because people don't want to, like we recognize that as shameful. Like I don't want to be something shameful. So yeah, so I found it was kind of it had a double blade kind of to it, double-edged blade, that it was uncomforting, discomforting, but also comforting in a way that it's actually very normal, and people will not even own up to it. So if you can recognize it even in yourself, then you're already halfway there into the solution.
I
So I
really
thought,
liked how. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, keep it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the example about like what I felt comforted by was that they said that you can recognize it and then like of course that everyone has it, but also that it's okay as long as you recognize it and then you don't act upon it. Like I felt like that second part of making sure that you don't act upon it was very important. Like they were talking about the life insurance broker and how he thought about there was that uncashed check in his pocket, and he thought, I'm the only one who knows that the person actually bought the life insurance. Should I tell my boss about it? Should I not do anything? Should I just pretend that nothing happened? We won't have to pay out. So I felt that that was comforting to know that a lot of people go through, like, they have these feelings, but they don't act upon them. So
Yeah.
that comforted me too.
And there's and it's interesting them putting you momentarily in the minds of these people. There was who's the individual that he quotes? Is it Haas or something, that was in the concentration camp?
Yes,
And
I think so.
and when the Germans one day, or the Nazis are counting out and they're shooting every 10th person,
10.
and he says he realizes and he sees the person next to him is all kind of weak, and he just kind of pushes him in the 10th position, and that guy gets shot. And he says he didn't even really, there was no time to even be processing what he's doing. It's survival mode. And then he has to carry this burden for the rest of his life. Damn. But then again, you're kind of put in this thought experiment that if you were in survival mode, would you kind of not do that? As horrible as that sounds, because pushed to the nth degree, you're not being rational. You're being just on survival mode. You're just thinking, I have to, there's me or there's this person he just rationalized it by, well, he's so weak anyway, rather, just push him. It's very, it's very gritty, just getting into that state of mind. Yeah. I mean, were there certain...
Just sort of.
Sorry, what I want to say, what I enjoyed from those examples is that he showed you the different levels of when it's almost like kind of like a harmless type, to the example when he goes into depth about what happened in Nazi Germany and how it became so, but it led to what it did, and the dangers of it. So that's what I enjoyed from the different examples, from the humanitarian point of view, and in a way of how society actually wants that and enjoys that, and I mean how the viewer ratings increase with certain shows that show the humiliation of others, and then from one level, the different levels of it.
Yeah, you see, it's like there's another book called The Pleasure of Hating. It's a small essay by a classical one by William Hazlitt, and I did share it on the Discord thing as well. So it's interesting. He says in there that love with a little indulgence gives way to indifference or even disgust. Hate alone is immortal. That, you see, because some people, like what they're trying to say is that this emotion of hatred is perhaps the most purest emotion that humans carry, that they don't mistake or don't doubt. like do I really love this person? Do I hate this person? If you hate them, you don't doubt it. It's like, so it's interesting that there's a nasty side of us, this kind of bestial, this kind of that we're ashamed of, but it may be, one of the most powerful emotions that we carry, this kind of rage, which obviously at one level it's manifesting as hate, but then maybe it's sublimating, being expressed through different, like Schadenfreude is one manifestation of hate. It's sublimating at a much easier, like a less intense frequency. It's not obviously rage. It's just and yeah. What I could see Ibn Firnas is just focusing away, gone into some deep meditative state there. Share your thoughts, Ibn Firnas. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. Thing about Schadenfreude is the feeling inside, but my personal opinion on it is how you understand it and control it, and also it's to do with how you're brought up. So again, for example, if I give you an example of football, if you support a team, you would have a stronger connection there, right? With the team losing, obviously you would have some joy there when a team loses. But if I gave you a sport you've never heard of, you wouldn't even think about it, blink an eye. So sometimes it's that connection that humans have with certain events.
You say that, but the experiments he brought from Henry Tajfel, who was the social psychologist, that he speaks of the group, the in-group, out-group. And they show that when individuals were even randomly allocated to groups that meant nothing, like they just based on shapes or just based on random stuff, they still went to the extent to favor the in-group, that even against the out-group, and they would want the out-group to suffer a loss, even if it meant they themselves are losing, but they're losing less than the other people. And the group there was insignificant. It's like if I just say, right, okay, I'm just going to pick random numbers and allocate you two are even numbers, so you're a group. Like you have no, it's just pure random. There's nothing between you and the other group member that brings you together. He found that even in those situations, the concept of a group, and he called it the what is it, the minimal group paradigm. That's it. So that you have that there could be the smallest thing that ties you, like it's meaningless, but the fact that you are now, once you are in a group, you will favor that group against the out group. It doesn't matter what the it's crazy, because because you read it and you think, bloody hell. And I remember going over some of his stuff years back in psychology in the degree, and it just obviously this brought it all back when I was reading it, and I was thinking, yeah, bloody hell. And he has this quote which he says that people study the individual in a group. So researchers, psychologists had been studying, and sociologists, the individual in a group. And he flips it. He says that actually what they've missed is the group within the individual. That we all within us carry a template of a group, and whatever fits it. So we could change it. So now, like you mentioned, it's a football team. That's your group. Now we take you out of that and put you somewhere else, and now it's your neighborhood group. And we take you out of that, put you, oh, now it's your faith group. Now we take you out of that. Oh, it's just your, BMW group. Whoever just has BMWs, you just, or it's just like we make it over anything. Oh, it's the music you listen to, or it's the, and I found that, that was actually very, very interesting, very kind of revelatory for me, because just seeing some of these small experiments with the group where it means nothing, but you still side with your group. You think, nah. And what was that quote? That it's not enough that we win, but others too must fail.
Basically, Twitter war.
Yeah.
Twitter wars. That's what it is. Groups.
Yeah, the what wars?
Twitter
wars. Oh,
the
yes.
social media.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what? Yeah, that's some definitely some interesting stuff there. But were there some chapters that that stood out more to you guys, or something, some topics, subtopics that had much greater interest within that?
Like the topic of justice, like how it satisfied the inner need of justice.
That was really interesting, because he's explaining in there, I believe, if I recall it correctly, Lerner and co. are the researchers, that he says they come up with this just world theory, and they say that because we all believe that the world is a just world, and what we mean by that is what goes round comes round, like kind of karma, this kind of karmic experience, and in many ways that could be a good thing. It helps navigate our actions, helps us be good people. But then when we see someone suffering, we apply that and we think, well, maybe that's a defense mechanism. We think, oh, well, maybe they did something to deserve it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, were there some examples and stuff he says in there? I can't, I don't know if that comes to your mind.
Yeah, there was the example of the woman who was raped, It was in the 1980s, he said, and
Yeah.
the jury actually acquitted the
Acquitted him.
rapist.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was in the 80s. That if you think about it, it's not even that long ago,
Yeah.
like 40
And
years
and
ago.
and they, to acquit him, they said
He was
about
like asking for it, or she
this.
deserved
She had
it.
some kind
Like,
of laced skirt on,
Yes.
and they said,
About
"Well,
underwear.
they said like, well, she's clearly asking for it with the lace on her skirt." That's like, what the hell? And you're right when you think about it. It's not like, it's only a few decades ago. I mean, it's not like we're talking a century or 2 centuries ago. You're talking just recently, where the fact that the jury got together, this is meant to be sensible individuals, and said, well, clearly, clearly you didn't do anything wrong. It's like they go, duh. That's like, duh. I have to say, some of the things actually cracked me up, like in an ironic way, laughing like that. Like, what the hell? It's so absurd. It's kind of hilariously absurd. Yeah.
We hear that today, even sometimes you come across judges with similar comments, as you just mentioned. I think in India, there was a judge who made similar comments about women, how they're dressed or how they behave,
Okay.
which is controversial. I think it's quite a big talk about this, obviously removing him from that particular uh, judge. That he was obviously a judge, they wanted to remove him from there and replace him regarding a particular sentence. Again, you do hear about societies where something happens to someone, they blame the victim because they believe they are partly responsible for it. So therefore, they deserved some form of punishment in a way. So you do come across that even today. So it's not obviously always 1980s or 70s. We're surprised that we hear that far back, but it still goes on today with the similar sort of statements you get, or similar mindset, I would say.
Yeah. No, the reason that was so astonishing is that the whole jury acquitted this guy of a crime. Like, they acquitted, like they said he's innocent. Like,
and that
that's,
was in America
and it's
too.
not
It
like,
wasn't like,
you see, it's
yeah.
Yeah,
not like
why
saying,
we were in South Asia.
it's not like they're saying, you know what, they're saying he's innocent. That's just so absurdly ridiculous. Like, it doesn't make, like, I can't even compute what they're saying. Like, they're saying, nah, he's not guilty of a crime. Like, and so you're thinking, what? Like, how does, so this is why it's so kind of, I think, crazy. Well, okay, what do you, speaking of that, do you think it's, so in that incident, whether it's an incident as vicious as that, as rape, or whether it's an incident of robbery or attacks or other things, do you think an issue? Do you think it's in part that people feel, one, it's because, as he mentions in some parts of the book, this kind of inferior, like, let's say there's a beautiful woman, and now, even to women or men, there may be a level of antagonism, because, let's say, to many men, they may think, oh, she's out of my league, and it makes men feel small, because they think, oh, well, I could never be with a woman like that. And even maybe women that look at that woman may feel kind of insecure. So there's a side that is this, like, that kind of schadenfreude, that, well, they're kind of happy that, in a way, they're thinking, well, it's making them, like, so this is why they're saying she deserved it, or that side. Or do you think there's an element of, and he doesn't say this in the book, by the way, I don't recall it much in the book. Do you think it's like there's an element of defense mechanism, that people
Actually,
are
when I
sometimes
read,
scared when they, like, let's say see a robbery, or I see something, and as a person it scares you, so, or you see a murder, or you see something, and then as a defense mechanism you say, well, like, to make yourself think, well, it won't happen to
I'm
you.
safe.
Yeah, exactly. So you think, well,
Exactly.
maybe they did
Actually,
something
when
to,
I read that example, this is exactly what I thought, because I was like, no, it's not. It's not exactly jealousy or something like that. It's more about, just blaming.
defense mechanism. But why blaming them?
defense
But
mechanism.
why? Because of a defense, or
It's more like that, to save you from these crimes, we have made certain rules in the society, and you didn't follow those rules of modesty.
I don't think
So
they had
this is a
those
result
rules
of
in
it.
Hebrew,
Like
though.
she
Or-
didn't necessarily, it's not necessarily about justice that she was
Yeah.
brought to justice by being raped. It's
Yeah.
more about they think it's common sense.
or is it like, you see, what I'm trying to say
Like
is
they think
like,
it's common sense.
does a person almost as a, like as a ritual almost, like, I'm not saying it's a ritual, but like, let's say something happens and a person reads a dua, like, so it doesn't happen to them. This kind of, like, in a way, when a person sees something, by them being able to displace the fault, do they then console themselves by saying, well, I wouldn't do that, so hopefully I stay safe? Do you understand where I'm
Yes,
trying to
that's
view
what
it
I
from?
feel actually.
Like, are they trying to
what
say,
I
like, oh, well, like, let's say somebody has some jewelry on and they get robbed, and they say, well, well, that person, why were they wearing this kind of jewelry? What's wrong with them? Like, is this a way to not have to cope with it empathically, and also assure yourself that, you know what, I wouldn't do that, so hopefully I'll be safe? Do you see where I'm coming from?
That makes sense now. Yeah, like that makes a lot of sense now.
I think that the author touches on it slightly
Does he?
in the
Okay.
example that he gives when he's attending a hospital, and he gives an example of a nurse that's very rude to a patient at the hospital. And I think what I extrapolate from what he's saying is that it's our knee-jerk reaction to place a justification or to give a reason to why that is happening to that man. But it's up to us to just take a moment back and say, what has actually happened? Could it not be as it seems? So in a way, he almost does give us food for thought,
Yeah,
in a
No,
situation
he
like that.
does.
I think
He does. The only thing is that why is it in the? I don't understand. Why is it in the justice section?
yeah, I
If
think that
it
what you're
doesn't.
saying, Zakira, is that where he's speaking of the fundamental attribution error, and he's saying that when we see something, we ascribe it to them. Like if we saw a person shouting at a nurse, now we would automatically assume that he's, and
What a
like
jerk.
he's, yeah, like what a jerk, like what's wrong with this person, impatient, rude. And whereas it may be that the nurse was being rude to him, and he gives a context, like she said, well, your wife's going to die anyway, and I've got other people to look at. And so he's kind of reacting to that. Yeah.
But more than that, I think he's telling us that it's our knee-jerk reaction to immediately say that guy's a jerk, and we have to take a moment back to say. And he gives the example that he recalls himself being angry, in a very similar situation. So it's easy for us to say, "Oh, I would never do that," until you take a moment to say, "Well, maybe I did do that,"
Yeah, no, definitely. Because with the FAE, the fundamental attribution error, they say that we as people generally do, when we look at other people, we and look at other people and things gone wrong, we usually always explain it dispositionally, and when we look at ourselves and things gone wrong, we explain it situationally. So we will say, well, why am I late? It's because today there was an exceptional amount of traffic. Why are you late? Is because you just can't be bothered to turn up on time. So there's always this kind of, that when we look at the rest of the world, we judge their disposition. But for ourselves, we will always say, well, no, there's a context to, and I think that is him in the end of the book trying to say, if we can slightly shift that, we might get a better grip on Schadenfreude. Because if we can start to explain, well, maybe they had reasons, then, maybe the Schadenfreude kind of gets a bit less. I think that was his. You're right. He doesn't really speak on how to. I don't know because I don't know how anybody could speak on how to handle Schadenfreude, because it's an emotion. Apart from, unless they're going to come at it from a very spiritual perspective, or trying to say that, So but I take it that was his little attempt at the end to kind of curb it in, and
Yes. It
yeah,
was like a remedy, almost like a light remedy, you know?
yeah. And I think the humilitainment chapter was fascinating as well.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, because he's
I didn't even know that was a term.
yeah, I
Humilitainment.
think he's just he says somebody who made it up. I forgot who kind of termed it, but he does say it in here. And it's, I think, you see, what I found very, in many ways, some of the things we already know when we're reading them, we're like, oh, I already know that. But it's like he's spelling it out for you, and you're thinking, like the penny kind of drops again. And because he says about humilitainment, he says, well, it just goes to show that we like to hate as a people. Like we kind of we have this urge to hate on things, but we know also that it's wrong in society and shameful to hate. So when given an excuse to do it with a green light, we go all out. Because, and he chooses like pedophiles as an example, because like pedophiles, everybody in society hates pedophiles. So that gives it, that's like a green light. Like you can now fully express. So he speaks about How to Catch a Predator. That show was why it's such a success, and because everybody can kind of get carried away laughing, and at the same time saying, he deserves it. And nobody will even try to justify. Because if they do, they're worried, oh my God, people are going to, slap me in with the... So, yeah, that topic, I must say, that chapter was definitely very, very fascinating. Yeah.
And that whole humilitainment also makes us feel better about ourselves, because we're looking at, look at that rich and famous celebrity and how they're messing up. It's also like a bit of a consolation to yourself in your own life.
Yeah.
What you're doing.
Because he says that this was interesting, like I'm saying, that him breaking it down for you, because these emotions, we recognize them, but when somebody spells it all out, like he mentions that schadenfreude and envy as well, and things, they're often linked with a sense of inferiority and a sense of superiority in the other person. So if a person was inferior and they have perceived inferiors, right, so to someone, them having something often didn't create that schadenfreude effect, like in some of the studies that he shows, like when somebody came in dressed a bit like a homeless person, all shabby clothes, and the people didn't feel so like, because they didn't feel that sense of but when a person feels a threat, I don't know if threat is the right word, but they're made to recognize that they are, like you said, celebrities. Like celebrities constantly remind us of what we are not. Isn't, like, at a subconscious level, I know people, celebrities are, awesome, cool, whatever, but on many levels, subconsciously, they're reminding us what we are not. Like, people think, well, I'm not that cool, I'm not that rich, I'm not that, awesome, I'm not that loved, I'm not that, and it makes you feel a bit crappy about yourself after. So when you're seeing somebody mighty fall, it's like, at least I haven't done this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, Mufti.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Saying
the
about
interesting.
Sorry. Yeah, the American Idol in that section as well, where people came up for like 5 minutes fame, obviously a lifetime of creation there. So they got ridiculed, obviously.
American Idol, yeah. That even all of the idols, it's so interesting because you watch some of these clips, like memes almost, like short clips and viral clips, and you'll see people going on like Britain's Got Talent or these other shows, and they're making a fool out of
I
themselves.
only watch audition clips of such shows. Seriously. But I don't watch what happens afterwards because
Yeah.
they all are good singers, those who get selected. So I don't care about them. But I always watch audition clips because they have terrible singers in there.
Schadenfreude,
This is exactly because when you watch it, you're cracking up laughing and you're thinking, and it's true, like he says, that we justify it by saying, well, they should have known how crap they were, so it serves them right. Like, how could have they thought in any right mind that they're gonna get through?
And that's what makes those obviously express that feeling because we're thinking the same, exactly the same thing. Why did they come on the show when they had no chance whatsoever? So that's one of the games that we have.
Yeah, and it justifies for us, doesn't it? It makes us kind of feel, but it comes back to that superiority as well, because you feel, you see, by recognizing somebody humiliated, there's a sense of inferiority because you feel like, well, I'm not humiliated right now. I'm not that fool out there that's, pretending to sing and he can't even sing. And so it's an elevated sense of self, isn't it? So amazing that, you see, if we lived in, he has a section, I think, earlier on in the book where he quotes Rousseau. And he says that Rousseau speculates that early man lived in quite an isolated state of self. Like he was, maybe just him and his family and that's it. And a few people but there wasn't a social kind of thing. And then he writes that, you see, if that is the case, I mean, obviously we don't 100% know, but let's say that was the case, then you wouldn't be as self-conscious, because the more estranged we are in our encounters, the more self-conscious we become. Like, let's say you're at home, you will, like, you might just be dressed shabby, you might just be in your pajamas, you might be like this. Like, let's say it was lockdown, now people just got used to that. Like, everybody would always just wear pajamas or and let's say now even your immediate household family, you wouldn't, like, sometimes people, it doesn't matter, they're just lounging around, they're not doing themselves up, they're not, because they just, oh well, these people, like, don't matter, like, they see me all the time. And whereas all of a sudden, if you had to go out to the shop, a person would be like, oh my God, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to go out in flip-flops, and I'm not going to go out in this kind of robe. I'm not going to, like, you become self-conscious all of a sudden. So it's not even people, because you could have people living with you, but you get so used to them that they kind of don't count for self-consciousness anymore. They're like, it doesn't matter. I found that very interesting. That that how the social thing is so important to raise our sense of self-conscious. And I think in many ways, maybe that's why children are more self-conscious now, because of social media and because there's like whereas when I don't know how, like, I'm trying to think when I was a kid, how self-conscious was I? Like, okay, maybe when I went to school and stuff, I don't know, but I don't think I was as self-conscious as kids are today.
You wouldn't have been, you had no social media back then.
Yeah.
Limited TV. So back when I was small, obviously, we used to rent a TV back in the day.
Oh, at least your parents would rent one. No, we did have a TV, to be fair. I thought you were going to say that's because you were in the 19th century when about me.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
So I remember when I was young, I used to go to school and I met kids from different backgrounds. I was interested from the backgrounds they came. So when I used to go home, I used to ask questions of why is this person different, why is that person. It made me a bit more conscious about different cultures, to be fair, and different backgrounds and different languages as well. Because when I looked at TV, you had, for example, let's say you had Hindi, you had Urdu, you had Punjabi, right?
No.
I couldn't figure out the difference in those three. They all sounded the same to me, so I had to be
Serious?
told what the
Okay.
difference was.
Okay.
Because I couldn't tell the difference, to be fair.
Were
All three
your
seems-
parents British born as well?
No, they were from Pakistan, but
Okay.
they came in. They were quite young. To the
Okay.
UK.
So spoke English fluently and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But that's not the main. The main problem would be is like my father wouldn't watch. For example, I personally never listened to music. Funny thing, why? Because my father never listened to it. So
Okay.
there was no way that I'm gonna come home and turn on the decks or something like that. Never happened. So I've never listened to music in my life. In terms of TV, so I remember when my sister used
In
to
my
go
life,
to,
a bit of a slight blag there, I'm sure, but
it's fine.
slight,
Yeah, I don't
slight,
listen to can't
you
see
know,
difference.
you're just
I wouldn't know
upping the blag level. Like I never heard it in my life. I wouldn't even know what music. What is music?
is
What is
this?
music? Can somebody explain to me what music is?
Let's put it this way: for me to go out and seek or what's the next big song, stuff like that, I wouldn't have a clue because I have. But when I was young, my sister used to go to school and they used to talk about like Coronation Street EastEnders. We had no idea what the stuff was, so she used to come home and watch because of her friend social circle she had to have some conversation. I think one of the talks you had, Mufti, I don't know which person it was with. Was it Mehdi Sajjad? I think his name was.
Yeah, there was.
And you mentioned that when you were young, you used to look at the DVD cases and used to look at the stories behind what happened and ideas.
Yeah.
Similar sort of scenario. Right, so that's what it was. And I remember when the internet first came, probably about 95, 96, and that's when it was a whole new world to us. And when Paltalk, I think it was called Paltalk back then, 99 maybe, similar like this. And I realized what the world is a lot bigger than I thought it would be. But it made you a lot more conscious about yourself. And because from childhood I was with different cultures, it didn't make me jump. Like Schadenfreude didn't come. Like I didn't feel guilty. Or look, this community here has this here. I don't have it.
You know, I'd like to ask about that. No, I'd like to ask because since you're saying childhood, and I think since everyone here is brown, right, on this episode, right? So, you know, growing up, like when you watched TV or movies or what did it create? I wonder if it created a kind of a dissonance in what you saw and how you then perceive yourself, because you see everything on TV that was, let's say, because the only TV we would watch was normal TV, which are normal movies, let's say, or stuff, or sometimes would watch Bollywood. Now the normal stuff was all white American, that kind of stuff. And when you watch it as a kid, you see, this is interesting because I feel that you interject characters. So, you know, you're watching a character and you're kind of thinking you're like that character in the movie. And so let's say you're watching some action movie and you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm this action person. But then at some point, I don't know, I wonder if the color thing hit you. Like actually you're very different in a way. Because I actually remember as a kid realizing like, actually, like I don't, like I'm actually different. And I think for that reason, we perhaps enjoyed maybe watching Bollywood because we felt that they were a bit similar to us. Like not bit, they were kind of similar, like brown. And even though we were embarrassed of speaking about Bollywood at school, like at school, we never used to, even though other kids watched it as well, but everybody was embarrassed of it. So we wouldn't say that we used to watch Bollywood, but I think the reason we liked it is because there was a sense of identification, like we could identify more. And it's only in later age, upon reflection, I thought about it and I thought, that actually makes a lot of sense. I wonder if that had occurred to any of you guys. Maybe not, because you were saying that about all of that and as a kid. Yes, no.
You know,
It has occurred to me actually.
Say that again.
It has actually occurred.
Yeah. Yeah, because I definitely felt it, and I used to think, I wonder if other people felt like that. And I'm glad that nowadays the whole thing is mixed. Like when kids watch stuff, it's all mixed. You know, you get all colors, everybody's on there. So they can kind of interject it as normal. Because if you don't, and you're just a minority, you kind of feel. Because I remember as a kid feeling like really, like I didn't fully understand the racism thing fully. But I do remember in primary school, at that time, this is going back now, it's going to put me almost at Darwin's kind of level, right? So in age, right? So I remember we had pen pals. We were introduced to pen pals. And you know, that was one of the times I first became conscious of it. Like we were introduced, and it was all kind of, they were all white, and it was all and it's just like, you see, because as a kid, it's just like in the movies, the names, things, regular things, Kevin, this, that, you know, these kind of, and you realize, well, actually, and you have to say your name, and they're like, what's your, and we must have been about like 8, something like that, and you just realize that, like you feel like I felt, obviously in our school we were kind of all ethnic, but at that time I remember it kind of becoming very apparent to me that like we've got, like our names are really difficult for these people, we don't even look cool, we don't, like I remember thinking like, because these kids did actually look quite cool and for that age, and you think bloody hell. And I became conscious, like I don't know if I became conscious as a whole, but in that moment I became aware that that, and you're right, you know, this, and I suppose it ties into that book. You have, I think you can't help but have a sense of inferiority, superiority, like you think, because if you see it on TV and you see everywhere and you see that you're not like that, you can't help, I think, but feel that like maybe I'm not actually like these people. And so yeah, it's, so I guess in this day and age, it's really good that it is very distributed across people.
Yeah, I think on TV they used to have Thunderbirds, so you got the English version, and I think they did have, I don't know if it's Hindi or Urdu, but they used to have one of the versions. I used to enjoy that more than the English version, because I found it fascinating that you know, I think it's probably on BBC maybe. Back then they used to
Okay.
have the where they have these Asian programs on, dubbed ones. Yeah, dubbed programs on.
Okay. You see, to us, it wasn't really language. I don't think language, it
Yeah,
occurred to me more. It was more so the whole culture and the appearance. It was more like that. It wasn't so much because the language. I guess we just, yeah. I guess we never really thought. I don't think I thought much about like I obviously knew we understand this and they don't. But yeah, because there was a case in here that he mentions about a convict, a black guy from America who gets done for all these crimes, and I think murder. I don't know whether it's murder, but gang rape and all these things, and he's in prison. And I think later on he becomes something as well. I'm sure he
A
becomes.
journalist.
Yeah, becomes a
I think
journalist.
he
That's
becomes a
it. Yeah,
journalist.
you're right.
Yes.
But how he describes his whole, that Schadenfreude thing. He says like when he's in prison and he's playing chess against, let's say, a white inmate. To that guy, it's just a game of chess, but to him, it's like this whole war. Like I have to, It's this whole thing about it's like much larger than life. It's like I'm, against this white guy. I have to beat them at all odds, and it was actually quite sad as well, actually reading that, because obviously he's got into all these crimes as well. But how he says that, he felt from being from a kid. He realized that, because he's black and he doesn't really, white people are better off and they get all these extra things and they're always successful, and it's almost, and his whole life, even as a journalist, is still shaped by that direction. Because even as a journalist, he's saying, when he covers these white people that are successful and have messed up, he's like always happy, and he's like, yeah, it's like this person, he's all drunk and he's, they speak all these things and they fall over and they do, like, he still has that kind of joy to him. And I thought, damn, like from a kid, how it shaped his life, and going right through, even though he's got some kind of profession at the end of it, but still it's still shaped by that kind of hatred. And wow.
You,
So it made me feel
you
it
know,
was
I want to.
very helpful
Sorry, I
on
want to add. I want to add to on what Mufti is saying. About when you grew up, like for us in school, also like maybe sports and all these athletic types of things were reserved for the white kids. If you were gonna do athletics and running and sport, and we say Indian in South Africa, because of apartheid, but it means like brown. Whether you're from Pakistan, Bangladesh, whatever you called Indian, so the brown kids were more like pushed into like the accounting and the money and the business and those sorts of things. So we joke now. We said like this Tinder swindler. He didn't date an Indian woman. He didn't date a brown woman. He wouldn't have gotten away with it.
It wouldn't have worked.
It wouldn't have worked. No ways.
Tinder swindler, when he said my enemies, she would have been like, I've got my fair share of enemies, don't worry. Like, which one are
Yeah,
your
don't worry,
enemies?
it's okay. Not a buck for you, man. Not a buck.
What village are they from? Because we'll... that's but you see, that's a good example. Like, Tinder swindler is a good topic for like Schadenfreude, because now the reaction, you see, it's kind of, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt that the show kind of backfired, because I felt that the guy is actually he's actually become even more popular. And and he's like still at large, and in fact he's thriving, and people are saying, like, a lot of people seem to be kind of making memes, like taking photos with him and saying hey, and I've seen some photos viral of some people saying hey, I'm with the Tinder swindler, and the women, people have been kind of like cussing them and humiliating them, saying, well,
yeah, like how dumb, how could you allow that to happen to yourself, unfortunately. But this is what's being said, like, really, there isn't much sympathy for the woman.
So it's
unfortunately,
and I think it's so relevant, because it is exactly this. It's exactly Schadenfreude, isn't it, in a way, because we're kind of like, well, you know what? Then you deserve it. Well, this is the attitude, isn't it? That if somebody says my
you didn't
enemies,
do accounting in school, you see.
well, if you're going to give $500,000 to someone, then it's like, well, I don't know. How did you guys feel about that show? Because now thinking about it, I must say, admitting, like, whether it's Schadenfreude or what, but I too am guilty of that. That watching that show, I was like, well, you kind of deserve it then. And this is, I'm just being honest. I kind of felt that. Now I feel bad saying it, but
it's so embarrassing. That's the thing, this Sean. We feel so embarrassed.
It's ridiculously embarrassing saying it. But I guess so. I did feel that. I felt like, well, it kind of serves you right. And I wonder how you guys felt about that, the Tinder swindler. Did you, Mustaqim, have you watched it?
I have not, Mufti. I don't know if I should.
I don't know. It's. I guess it's up to you. It's okay. It's a documentary. It's not. It's interesting. Right. It's just because it's a current theme and everybody's talking about it in different ways. It's sometimes relevant. But what about you, Ibn Farnas? Did you watch it?
I watched it. Yeah. I think when it comes to scams, we view that different to other crimes. For example, in scams, the victim is walking in to the scam themselves. They're giving into it. Whereas if it's a murder, for example, or a robbery, you're not really guilty of it. You were just in the wrong time, wrong place. But with the scam, you're fully responsible. I did watch it. It's just amazing how people continuously give out money to the same person over and over again.
You see, here's a note. I want to ask you guys as well, Fazila, and also Scorpio on Tinder swindler, what your thoughts. But here's a thought that I've observed, and I mean, this is like a psychological observation, that we will, like, the worst thing that we will like to admit to is that we've been scammed. Like, what I mean is, we would much happen over that. We would rather say, like, a person would rather say that, for example, they were robbed, And that's not a nice thing to say, but rather than saying somebody, it's like if you had to say that, you know, a salesman, like a guy came to me in a car
Yeah,
park.
because saying that you got scammed
Yeah.
might make people think that you're stupid
Yeah,
or dumb or
exactly.
naive.
And this is like, because it does make you feel stupid, because it's like because it's like the pit of, you know, our self-esteem. Because if like somebody approaches you in a car park and says, hey, you know, I got this phone, you want to buy it? Yeah, quickly, you know, give me £200. You say, okay. And then he gives you some fake empty phone and he goes quickly, and then you're like, damn, I just got ripped off. And these kind of things happen all the time in car parks with laptops, and it's like a common scam that people will do. What they do is they show you something, let you hold it. They do it with watches, phones, laptops, cameras. And the moment you say, yeah, they're giving you a deal, they'll put it into a case, but then they'll have another case with a cheaper version in there. And they'll kind of swap the cases when you're not looking and hand you that box. So you've seen it and held it. Now you go into your car, you open it, and you've got like a really cheap one for like 20 quid, but you've paid 200 and something for it, or 300. So, and this is like a common scam that in many places. But it would be so embarrassing to own up to that yeah, I got scammed, because it is ultimately saying I'm stupid. It's somebody, you know, it's ultimately saying, and it just goes to show how we abhor being stupid. We're like, you know, I'm anything but not stupid, you know. Yeah, so yeah, what do you guys make out of the Tinder swindler thing? Was it any emotions of Schadenfreude, or what did you
Yeah,
think?
I've got to admit, at first I was like, how could you be that dumb? Like, and then after reading the book, I was like, oh crap, like, you're not supposed to make like value judgments. And I feel like it also ties back into what you said, like how it makes you feel safe if you say that someone else was just dumb. You feel like, oh, if I was
If
ever
I
in this
was there,
situation,
I would like never get into
I
this
would never.
situation.
And in reality, who knows, like what they might say to get you to do something. So
Yeah,
I feel like it's important to see things
yeah.
from other people's perspective and be empathetic,
Yeah.
because that also like teaches you better, to like not just protect yourself, but like to understand them, but also to learn from life. And if you're faced with something in the future, like you'll have that perspective.
Because
Yes, definitely.
there's a difference between hot and cold scenarios. Like the hot one is where some philosophers have described them as hot cold. Like one is where you're just thinking about it. Like, hey, if somebody ever approached me, then I would say this. That's like a cold, just a hypothetical. And the hot is where you are actually in it. And in it,
Yes.
you think different. And a good example is like a lot of crime scenarios that will happen with young men. They happen because they just happen to be there, and some guys will say, oh, we're going to do this, and now they feel that, well, you know, if I don't go along, I'm going to lose face. Or you see, it's not really a rational thought through. It's just in the moment they just kind of be part of the group and just do it. And then, but if they were on their own and in a cold situation, they would probably think, no, I wouldn't do something like that. That would be like he mentions in the book, when they beat up the homeless people, and even in one case kill. I was like shocked that I you know, when he said it, I was unaware of it, although I could imagine it. I guess it wasn't unimaginable. Like he said, oh, this is actually a sport, that they go around finding homeless people and they just beat the hell out of them. And I thought, what the hell is wrong with these people? But
Oh, yeah.
it's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, he says when they interviewed the young lads and they said, why did you do it? And he said, well, because it was fun. And he goes that they weren't accepting that as a difference, as a reply, but he was trying to explain that, well, you see, that whole superiority, inferiority, and this is how they saw it. Like they became a part of the group and de-individuated, like they lost their individual responsibility and just moved as yeah. But I definitely, because to be fair though, I do still think with the Tinder swindler, I do think that, okay, in a situation you would help, because if you were directly involved with someone and you did have some money, you would help. But I just felt you wouldn't go to that, like let's say you'd help with maybe, I don't know, anything up to, let's say if she went between $1,000 to even $5,000 between there. Let's say she did that for somebody she valued, and because she's just a normal person, she's not like some, millionaire. She's just some normal person who's working, and so that's for someone who's just regular off the cuff to just say, well, here's $2,000 or here's $4,000, that's a big amount for just normal people. So. But for her to go all the way to $250,000, and you think, well, surely she should have said at some point that, hey, you're the billionaire. I'm sure you've got many billionaire friends. Why don't you give one of them a phone call? Like, why are you calling the broke one? So I did.
Also,
Oh,
don't they
there was
also
some.
like sort of say that like, oh, just a little bit longer, I just need a little bit more, and then I'm
Yeah.
gonna pay you back like tenfold or something.
Yeah.
Like I've heard some women get scammed that way too.
No, I accept
And
that, but I would have thought you cap it at
I
a
know, like
limit.
personally, I would have been like, this is it, that's all you're getting. But I don't know.
Yeah, but also remember, I think, look, I watched like half the documentary. I walked in and I was like, but one of the ladies were actually, I think, physically beaten up. I think I saw that part
No,
at
not
the end,
not
or
by
towards
not
the end, or
no
three
not
quarter of it, where
not
one of
by
the ladies
him.
were actually
No, not
not.
by no.
What is it?
She had said, there was a lady who said that she had previously been attacked by some people. Like it wasn't related to this
Yes.
incident. She had been beaten up by some people, and she feared that when he started threatening her as well, like she was afraid because she'd already had some
Oh,
violent attacks in the
okay.
past.
No, I had understood
Yeah,
it.
he
See,
didn't.
context is very
Yeah,
important as well,
yeah. No,
because I
I
had
don't think he
understood
had.
it that it was like,
He was making kind of
what?
vague threats like, every action gonna have
No,
reaction. He was kind of
no.
making these
So when
threats.
he was threatening, like, not when he was threatening, when he was telling her that, oh, I'm being threatened by my enemies, and then she was actually beaten up, not by him, but it was as made to seem as if it was one of his enemies that were following her. Something like that. Was there not? Did I
No,
not get that
no.
part
So
right?
she,
That was,
no. So
yeah,
she
one
does.
of
You're
his
right.
enemies
They
they were
show
and then she
this.
got scared, and then she's like,
Yeah, so they show this image of her really bruised up and everything, but
yeah,
that's because she said like not so long prior to meeting him, she was attacked by some men in an alleyway or
okay,
something. So she was always kind of afraid, which is
okay,
natural. And then when he started kind of being a bit, he's got enemies. So obviously this also freaked her out even more. So you're right, she was getting afraid
okay,
because he's saying there's danger and there's
yeah,
enemies, and she's recently also been attacked. So yeah, but it wasn't a direct link. It
okay,
wasn't linked between the two. No.
okay. Okay. No, so I thought that just may be another factor why she actually gave in, because of this fear. And that's a situation we can't really, from the outside, it's easy to say like, oh, how could you? But we don't know what was she in her mental state,
Yeah. No, it is. No, it is. It is tragic. There's several cases. I had a mine trap. I think was it year before. I think it was 2020 actually, with Dr. Imran Khan, and it was he's from here, Birmingham, and he was speaking about a lot of cases, and he's actually told me in person, this is like off air as well, about a lot of cases where there is this money swindling that goes on, and he's talking about local, as in Muslim, kind of in the Muslim community. So where people will, for example, that they'll have this kind of dating thing going on, and let's say promise to marriage kind of relationships going on, and then they will say, oh, listen, I need £10,000, could you take out a loan? And sometimes they've taken out like 20, £40,000 like that. And there's been, to be fair, a few, and sometimes they'll do it over, it's not like in one go, so it's over a, like, let's say 2-3 years. and there's a few cases like that. I mean, quite a few actually. And he in that show, he kind of speaks a bit about it as well. And you know, he said on there that look, if any women are, you know, going through anything and they want to reach out to him, because you know who he is, and he's you know, he carries some sway in the community, and he has, obviously he's let's say old school, and so after the show, several women actually reached out to him. He told me, like, they actually reached out to him, and they were going through things like this. And you'll have issues where people have taken ridiculous, and he'll tell me. He told me actually actual incidents will be this guy who's like, he's got a normal family life going on, and he's swindled like something like 50 grand from this woman, and but it won't sometimes be in one go, but it'll be like over a period of like, let's say 2 years. And because she thinks, oh well, we're in it for the marriage, she'll kind of hack it. And but then he's already got his own family and everything, and he's like, so he was, there's a bunch of these kind of nightmare stories. So wow, it is yeah, it's quite shocking actually.
Curious?
Yeah.
And does anyone watch Shane Dawson on YouTube? He had a documentary on, I just looked her up again. Her name was Brittany Louise Taylor. And it was kind of a similar, this was like a couple years ago, but she also, like, it was nice because during the documentary, like, it walks you through like every single stage and what she was feeling at the time, and how this guy, I'm not sure, he was like from some Russian country or something. He pretended he was a doctor from like his own country, and then he
Oh, yes,
said,
I saw that. I have seen that
yeah,
episode. Yeah,
and
I
then
remember that.
said that I just need to take my test here and I'll be able to get a salary like $400,000 like every year,
He
no
just wanted to
problem.
come to some USA, right? Like he wanted to get
Yeah,
tickets and
yeah. Like
money.
he came to the U.S. and he just wanted to be like an old school Tinder swindler. But basically, so he tricked her. He said that, you know, we should, like, he was already dating her, and then later we found out he was dating like a couple other women and doing the same thing. But basically, she just like emotionally walked you through the process of how she agreed to date him, and then it wasn't upfront. He got into her head first, and then after a couple months of dating, that was when he slowly started saying that, "Oh, I'm really depressed right now." And then obviously if you're dating someone, you're like, "What's wrong? How can I help you?" And he said that, "I just need a little bit of money because I lost my job or whatever, and I can't get my license." Like, right? I think it was like his medicine license. And he
Yeah.
said that as soon as, like, I just need you to pay my bills and everything for a couple months while I'm studying, and once I get my once I take the test and I'm able to practice medicine in the US, because I was a surgeon or whatever, in some Russian country, then I'll be able to pay you back, no problem. And she asked for like documents or something, I think, and he made them up. He like got witnesses and testimonies and said, yeah, so it's just very temporary. They moved in together, they had a kid eventually, and she ended up leaving him after a very long time, because she thought that the kid was going to get trafficked or something. So it was like
Yeah.
very, until I watched that documentary, like going through all the emotional stages, I was always like, that could never happen to me, until I saw that you really got to watch out. Like,
Yeah.
they're very slow.
Because I think I mean, I don't know if it's, but I feel that in often women will try, I mean, maybe this is, I don't know how it's seen now to say this, but I feel that they will try so much harder to preserve a relationship. Like the value associated with especially within the Muslim setting, the value association given to a relationship, I'm sure it's valuable to both, but I feel that women's appreciate or value it somewhat higher than men, maybe by due to social pressure, maybe just the vision they have, and this kind of incremental development of the story, a bit like the kind of boiling frog hypothesis that you put a frog in just regular water and heat it up gradually, and it just the theory, the myth is that it just stays there until it just boils, whereas if you put it in hot water it kind of jumps out. So it's a bit like that if the guy presents himself as, let's say, whatever normal is, and maybe promising, not even normal, but promising, hey, I've got a business, I've got this, I've got that, and now she's kind of like, let's say they're hooked, and then he starts to say, well, actually, I've just got this one little thing, could you help me tick over till a couple of months, and then, well, actually, I've just got to get this for my business. And I've personally heard a bunch of stories like this. I mean, I've heard quite a few that people will be like, well, and especially if they get married, and then they'll get married, and then because now it's the husband and it's the family and it's like this marriage, I can't let this marriage go to so they'll rather just want to believe that it is true. Let's hope it is true, and it goes on for a few years, and unfortunately in many of those cases left very devastated and with a huge debt by the end of it, because the guy, I've heard of stories where they'll go out to Dubai. I've heard of stories where it's local. I've heard of just a lot of them, very similar kind of archetypes. A person comes, it's usually presents himself with some kind of presentability. They take the kind of bait, and maybe he is legit to some extent. I don't know whether he's just totally not into them. He may be into them as well, but his story is false. Like, so he's got false pretenses. Like, he's saying, well, I'm this businessman, I've got this, I've got that, and yeah, it's been, and I think
over here in the States, we actually have something in the reverse direction. You'll have I've seen this a number of times. Sorry?
Anyone watches 90 Days Fiancé?
Oh, I've watched 1 or 2 episodes. So yeah, what were you saying, Imran?
Yeah, so people, many people over here, like, they go home, they get married, and men, they go back home, they get married. They can bring their new spouse over here, and her boyfriend is waiting at the airport, and she leaves with him.
Wait, what?
That's
What? Say that again.
Yeah.
What?
So
Wait, she
so
comes from where? She comes from, like, let's say, another country to.
from Pakistan.
Okay, so she's coming from Pakistan, let's say, to America, but her boyfriend
Yes.
is already in America.
Her boyfriend's in America, and she got married to
Why
this guy
didn't
for
the
paperwork.
boyfriend just bring her over?
I guess he didn't have the ability or something, but they'll use somebody. Yeah, it's happened to a
So
number of
when the
people that
husband's
I've
like
heard of.
at the airport, she goes past him.
She goes to the other guy.
"Oh!" She goes out the way. She goes, move out the way, loser.
Ja, Simran, ja.
Yeah.
The opposite has happened with like a couple of people that I know, like family friends, that like a guy, like he lived in the UK. One of them was in the US. And so the guys, like, they, for some reason, like, even though culturally they were very American, they decided to, because their parents, I guess, arranged a marriage for them from someone in Pakistan. And so the wife comes over, she's like completely unsuspecting because, like, he was, I guess, putting in minimum effort to string her along. So when she gets there, she finds out, like, it's her first day there, and she finds out that he's like already married, and the other one already has a girlfriend, and it was just like a green card marriage, and I was just like,
Oh,
okay,
he's
like, it doesn't make any sense.
he's come over in this case. He comes over and he's.
That happens too. Like, I've heard it that way, and I've heard it where the woman came over, but she had like her intentions, and she didn't know that the guy was already married. And I guess probably as a woman, like, I just hear more of the ones with the stories where like the woman's affected more. So I guess as men, like, you guys probably hear the opposite, where you gotta look out for yourselves.
I think, to be fair, I think most of the story. I don't think I would hear most of the stories where men are victims or anything. I would probably, the stories I hear generally are, to be fair, when it comes to do with this kind of migration and stuff, it's usually that they're actually just arranged marriages, that they're bringing people over, and they're just often more often than not also just a nightmare, but in a different way. And just so that's
most of the deceptive tactics we hear are the men doing the deception. The woman, but for women, I mean,
I think
the way they do it
I
is
probably
now, it's a whole industry. It's called sugar daddy. So that's there. It's just news when the man does it. You know what I mean?
Well, Imi, you're gonna have to share some details on that, because us naive, innocent people don't know these things.
At least with those, they're upfront though, like.
Yeah, of course.
It's not
like,
not deceptive, I guess. So it's just it's a lifestyle choice. That's what we call it. But yeah, speaking of all of these, these incidents, and actually, I was just going to say, I was going to bring it back to the current thing going on, because I think that's definitely worth talking about. But just a closing sentence on that. I think in all of those cases as well, that we were saying about these people coming over, or these cons, and it's interesting how in those same situations people do that same kind of defense mechanism, kind of well, such and such should have figured this out first, or they should have, they push the buck back onto them, that maybe as a defense mechanism, maybe it's not Schadenfreude in that sense that they're seeking pleasure, but they are at least refusing to be empathic, because maybe that's too taxing, that people don't want to be so empathic, so they just push it back, as in, you didn't do due diligence, and how could you not know, like, you marry this person, how can you not know? And which, even though the questions are sensible, it's not that the questions ain't rational, but it's just people going through these situations don't think in that way. They're just going with it, and they think, well, everything's fine. And
is there a term for that? Because is that like victim blaming? Because I feel like that's what I am.
Yeah. I guess so. You're right. It could be. Yeah, victim blaming is a nice term, I guess. I still don't fully understand the term gaslighting. I don't know whether I see people using it, and I think I understand it, and then I think, well, I don't know if I understand that term. So, but definitely I think it would be victim blaming. Yeah, it would be victim. But the question is, why are people victim blaming? And I think sometimes it might be that so as to not have to be empathic. And then the question is, well, why do you not want to be empathic? And maybe because evoking that emotion also evokes a vulnerability in you, that you feel vulnerable as well. So maybe it's like these layers, which we're not thinking, it's unconscious, but we're just, we're keeping strong. And maybe that's a way that people keep strong, by just victim blaming, like, well, well, it's because of that. It's just food for, I don't know, just a thought. But with all of this, Russia and this whole Ukraine crisis, people, what a time. Honestly, this book has been so timely. Right, what are your thoughts on what's going on? Right, so take it away, people. Who would like to share some thoughts on Dhakira? Would you like to say something on?
No, I want to listen in.
I
don't think I'm going to be much of a contributor.
Dhakira looking at the screen like when I said Russia, so I thought,
no, please, not me. We're dealing with our local problems.
Mustaqim, what are your thoughts? Is it same or?
Right. Well, Mufti, I first wanted to approach this from, well, obviously, no one's denying Schadenfreude is happening on like all fronts. If you look at any of the headlines, like everyone's engaging in it right now. But I thought about this while you were talking about Tinder swindler and all that stuff, and all these defense mechanisms, or when people try to justify Schadenfreude as justice, quote unquote. And what the hell is justice? I studied law for like I don't know how many years, and in our first year that was a question, like, what is justice? And there is no
You can't define it.
baseline or solid.
Is,
Exactly. There's
isn't
no
it from
solid
isn't it
answer
from
for that.
the trinity of the philosophers that you can't define that which will be justice, beauty, and goodness? These things can't be defined.
Exactly.
I mean, they can
So
be,
if you look
ironically,
at
they
it
can
in
be
that way,
recognized, but they can't be defined. Socrates, I mean, this was Socrates kind of
exactly.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking at it this way, that people use these defense mechanisms or these retroactive justifications for their Schadenfreude, or, passing judgment on a victim. Like, how could you be so daft to engage in that sort of behavior, giving that billionaire so many thousands of dollars when you know he could probably get it from somewhere else? So would it not be helpful to ask that when you feel or when you recognize that you are experiencing Schadenfreude, or you're experiencing this, whatever it is that you don't want to, you're kind of pushing it away from yourself. You don't want to be empathic. If you took it a step further and asked, what am I trying to push away? Would that go further in trying to sort of alleviate the problem? Like you gave the example of Dr. Imran when he came on your mind trap, that, after a while he decided, or not after a while, but he said that, I'm going to do whatever it is to help women who are in these situations. So if someone who is, for example, victim blaming, women who have gone under the Tinder swindler situation or whatever it is, and, they analyze why they are doing that, maybe because they've had some bad experiences in the past, and then take it a step further to say there are other people who are going to have that same bad experience later on in life. So what can I do to sort of help them out or make their situation better? Am I making sense? I mean,
Yeah, of
that's a
course.
long-winded answer, I guess, to
No, it's
how can
true.
we
Yeah.
how can we alleviate Schadenfreude, or at least, put that energy into a positive manifestation, so to speak. Now, the question is, I have no idea how we're going to do that in the Russia-Ukraine situation. I mean, especially lay people like us, or how the governments could actually put into effect everything I've just said for the last 2 minutes.
No,
But
because
I think
wouldn't
that's
would
the train of thought.
wouldn't you also feel that, for example, on the Tinder swindler thing, that documentary was an attempt to do that? It was an attempt to kind of other people who may suffer in the future to kind of help them. But I think it comes to that age-old question then, if God forbid it be true that we deep down love to hate, then maybe that's what preponderates, given, that humilitainment kind of chapter, that
Yes.
when we're given a pretext, an excuse to hate, like now that documentary, I think I'm certain that its objective was a force for good, that it was trying to protect more vulnerable women from the Tinder swindler and the likes of him. So you could watch it, and basically you could learn from the mistakes of others, like best way to get wisdom. In fact, that's an Arabic proverb, that the fortunate person, as-sa'idu man wu'ida bi ghayri, that the lucky person is the one who got the wisdom or by other people's mistakes. He didn't have to make them. So, but it surprisingly, I felt that the program, this may be my subjective opinion, I mean it is my subjective opinion, that I felt it may have kind of backfired. But obviously, why did it backfire? Maybe if some of what he's saying in here, that this deep down resolve of humilitainment, that we want to see people mess up because we feel a bit better, that we feel like, and especially if you're given an excuse, like let's say if let's say he hit that lady and robbed her, like nobody would kind of publicly ever laugh at something like that. Nobody in their right mind. But even let's say he even took $1,000 from her or something, people wouldn't have. But the fact she gave $250,000, it's like, this is like so absurdly high that it gives people the green light to kind of, well, have at it and say, well, what a fool, it gives that, if it's true that we have this deep down emotion that we want to hate anyway. We just need an excuse. And we need an excuse that we can get away with. So people don't say, what's wrong with you? You know?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying it's interesting. It's speculation. Like, we're trying to investigate why we are reacting to. And I think most people, as he says in this book, will not even accept that they experience Schadenfreude. Like, that most people will refuse. They'll accept anything but that. They won't accept that they have like some kind of envy or some kind of people, even envy. Like, look at envy. Like, we will hate to accept that we are envious of people. And that's a good point. Why do we hate to accept that we have envy?
Because it's a poor reflection on us as individuals.
But we could say, but people will accept anger. That's a poor reflection.
Because envy shows that we are lacking in something.
Yeah. It shows inferiority, and it shows
Inferiority.
it shows that you're you accept that you like this kind of this state of that your inferiority, them being superior, and this jealousy that is such a wretched state to all of us. Like, we think I ain't that. Like, we'll accept being angry, we'll accept even being weak. Like, people, like, I gave the scenario that somebody would rather say they got robbed than they got scammed. Because they might say, well, you know, the guy was stronger than me, he had a knife, he had, you know, like, what do you want me to... Like, it's still, even though it's a weak... Like, somebody could say, oh, well, I was scared, that's a weakness. But they don't... But being scammed is like you're stupid. Or being envious is like... It's just like it's like a cardinal sin, isn't it? I mean, I don't mean sin it is in the religious sense, but even as humans, we're like, anything but that. Like, don't be envious. Like, But with
And the thing is, Mufti, it's not always from the obnoxious sort of route. I mean, in the book Schadenfreude, I think he gave the example of Martha Stewart, and a lot of people, a celebrity, I don't actually know too much about her, but the example he gave is that the reason why people had a lot of Schadenfreude towards her is not because she was one of those high and mighty celebrities who's always pushing money in your face and showing you what you don't have, but rather it's because she seemed too perfect. And to kind of bring her down to our level as the plebs or the proletariat or whatever. So
the fallen.
That's why people sent a lot of
the fallen. That's who
why
we are.
people sent a lot of hate her way. But as opposed to, he gives the example, he contrasts us with, is it JFK, when he made some really weird mistake. I think it was some battle or something that he made a mistake in, but then people didn't have so much Schadenfreude towards him because they're like, oh, he's just human, he makes mistakes. And he never had such a perfect streak to begin with. So like, no, he was a normal human being like us. He never had this aura of perfectionism everywhere he went.
Yeah.
So I guess that's also another angle of where Schadenfreude emanates from. It's not always, hate from I want to destroy that person sort of hatred, but it could also just be let's level the playing field.
Because that's kind of with the priestly class, the whole, and the clergy and the imams and the preachers, and it's the same kind of this these people are too allegedly pure, and this kind of scandal, any kind of scandal, he quotes some in there about some priests as well. One of them takes, I think he hires from rentaboy.com or something, he hires some escort and he gets caught, and why it becomes such a big scandal. And I guess it's that thing because people, when they're seen as too perfect, in many ways they are reminding us of the things we are not.
Sorry, Mufti, it was perfect and hypocritical.
Yeah, hypocritical, exactly. Yeah, hypocritical is a very important point there. I think that's actually a more important point with the priestly class, because they are the ones telling you don't do this. And then they are doing it. So
We also had the example of like the politician who was helping create laws banning gay marriage, and then he actually had like a boyfriend or something. He
Yeah.
visited the masseuse or whatever. So I think hypocrisy, yeah,
Because
is
hypocrisy is a huge fall from grace, a huge fall from grace. Yeah, because I think it's one of the things that we despise as human beings so much. But yeah. So I mean, this with the whole Russian thing, I had a few people message me trying to, and I shared one on my Insta story where some people were saying, "Look, I support Russia," and and I, and I was just like, "Look, I'm not going to even reply to this." But then I ended up replying by saying, and this is really what I wanted to kind of just unwrap and unpack a bit. That you see, I don't think anybody, I don't know actually, maybe I'm wrong, but I wouldn't think people in their right mind would rather be living under a leader like Putin than they would with, let's say, like in America or in Europe. I don't think normal people, I could be totally wrong because people are going to watch this and say, what the hell is normal? But surely people recognize that he is like if he was your leader, it's very clear it's his way, or like he doesn't give, like there's zero, like you are not even a blip on the radar. Like it does not matter what you want or how you, it's just his way. And people wouldn't want to live under that. They would rather live under freedoms and rules and I have the right and but the support for him, I felt, was more so Schadenfreude, that look, you're seeing the mighty West, who once again hypocrisy, that they had turned, let's say, there's an element of a blind eye to all these other wars and all these other atrocities, Palestine, Yemen, you're going to say Burma, all these places that people, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now they are making this big outcry about war all of a sudden, and there's nothing they can do about it. Like, I mean, there is things, but they appear somewhat,
Like they
powerless.
cannot do anything as NATO. They just have
Yeah.
issues with NATO basically because NATO screwed up Iraq.
Yeah, or they can't, like they appear, they definitely lost face. Like it's very clear that there's nothing like they can do little things. Like obviously, I'm not saying sanctions are little, but it's not the same as saying, well, they just went and bombed Iraq, for example. They can't just go and bomb Russia. Like that's not even a thought. So people witnessing this all of a sudden, they witness this, let's say the thuggery of whether it's going to be the United States or of NATO, it's going to be being faced by thuggery again. And this must produce this kind of Schadenfreude that, well, what are you going to do here? The kind of enemy of my enemy kind of angle. This is what I was seeing. I mean, I don't know, what are your thoughts on all of this? Because surely because the alternative is no, they totally do rate Putin and they are behind him. Because I was seeing a lot of people showing a lot of support on TikTok and all these kind of things. I saw a lot of Muslim support for Putin. I saw people playing all these Arabic nasheeds in the background, and Putin's kind of walking and a pigeon salutes him, and they're saying like, this is like it was just short of this guy is, they're saying, forgetting the fact he's a staunch atheist, but they forget that part. But they really, there's all these things in the glorification, the fada'il. They could write a chapter right now, the fada'il, the virtues of Putin. So I don't know. So where is this coming from? Considering that only a few decades ago, Russia was seen as the arch nemesis of Islam. It was seen as, which is interesting as well. That was all propaganda as well. But you had this communism was, oh my God, the greatest threat to Islam. And and Putin was obviously growing up, that even the Chechenian war, he was leading. He was like head of the military thing, wasn't he, against the kind of mujahideen. So these people would have had this sheer hatred against Putin, and now there's this outright kind of, from some elements, like support and passionate support for Putin. So I was kind of seeing this as a reflection of Schadenfreude, as opposed to. But I wanted your thoughts on it. What do you guys feel?
It definitely is that only. Because Muslims generally, they are very, very hostile towards West. Like not even in terms of NATO, even like in their culture and all, like they're like, oh, this equality, there's a Western concept, liberty, Western concept, feminism, Western concept, and all. Like all these people, like even
But then
in
communism would be a Western concept. It would be a Russian
Western
concept.
concept.
Marxism,
Exactly. But
socialism.
people think more about the West because most of the Muslims, they are like towards the West. They divert themselves towards the West.
Is it mostly like Muslims that are? I mean, I've seen some like white supremacist type of people, but also after reading the book, I was thinking about how he said if you were hurt by that person, then like that feeling
Yeah.
of them like getting it,
Yeah,
that makes
exactly.
you feel happier. So I feel like maybe people who were most affected by America's wars, even though personally I feel like, sometimes some of them might be necessary, like the Kuwait War, maybe. If you think about how America became a country itself, like we needed to ask France for help to get our independence. No offense to you UK people, but
Doesn't
like
bother me in
we
the
need.
slightest.
But yeah, like there are still people who get mad, but like yeah, like sometimes you need to ask for help, and America at sometimes, like only sometimes, but they tried to be that country that would, through the use of military force, help others. But of course, now that you have all these bad examples where they had other like not so pure motives, they had ulterior motives, like especially in the Middle East, where we know that it was really just a battle for resources, like to put their bases there for oil and everything. I feel like those people feel like they were very hurt by the US, which is true. And so now anyone who can kind of take the, like
Humiliate
make
US,
the
they are
US,
happy with
yeah,
that.
like they're just happy
But
that there's
because
someone stronger than the US.
Yeah,
because
because
after that, US, the West just became the sole enemy
yeah,
of the religious people. Like there's this saying, no, that to unite people, you need to have a common enemy. So right now, for
yeah,
most of the people, the common enemy is the West.
yeah.
All
I
the
mean,
problems are
clearly
in the
that it's because clearly, I mean, there is, I said this on my thing that look, the imperial kind of attitude of thuggery, it's a imperial thuggerish kind of attitude of the states has been like it's well known. It speaks volumes. It's not like
It's the same thing in Cuba, the
yeah,
missile crisis.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's actually a good example of how when the Russians set up the thing, how it almost triggered, destruction of the world, because Cuba's obviously how close it is to the United States, and Ukraine asking for NATO kind of membership is. To be fair, I agree with the fact that is pressing all the wrong buttons. Like, you see, it is the agreement was that NATO would not spread
Beyond
eastwards.
Germany.
Yeah, it would not, and even all of Germany, because the agreement was that I think when it was West and East Germany, that they weren't expecting the other, but with the fall of the Berlin Wall, but then going right onto Russia's doorsteps, it is a very provocative statement. I think it wouldn't be tolerated by any kind of super power country. America definitely wouldn't tolerate it if in Mexico they built You know, if Russia built something in Mexico, that would never be tolerated. And I think it's highly like what they did, Ukraine doing that, and Europe kind of entertaining it, or NATO entertaining it, sorry, is very provocative. Russia then taking a step to, I will say, I did not think he would go to the extent that he's gone to. He just went right out in bloody just invade, you know, Kiev, and I thought, nah, he would never do something like that. And there you go, and he's done it. And I've got no idea how he even sees an end game to this, because like surely it's just a lose-lose scenario for him. Like I don't know how what in his mind could be a like a win from this, apart from he's destabilized, so that's a win, I guess. He's destabilized Ukraine, so the chances of them joining NATO are very difficult, because obviously if NATO join it then and it's destabilized, then they have to put boots on the ground, isn't
Other
it?
rest of the countries, they also won't join NATO, seeing Ukraine.
Say that again, sorry.
So, like even other countries which are not part of NATO yet
Yeah.
will think twice before joining NATO.
But I think if they're
So
not a threat to Russia, then it wouldn't make a. It's just that this was such a huge country and it's on the doorstep of Russia. So it's the largest in Europe, Ukraine. And so it's such a big country. And I think that's the provocation that, But I
Like
don't.
he kind of did it. I
Yeah.
felt like he kind of did it because, like, who's gonna stop him right now? You
yeah, because
know,
he
like
knows that NATO is not
we
gonna
have
come in because there
Biden
could
in
be World War
power.
III.
But what's the end game?
I feel like he just wants to incorporate those areas as part of Russia again, because hasn't he been trying over the past few years? Like he went into Georgia and some other places. Like I feel like maybe he wants to reincorporate them, because some, like it was of course the minority, but some people also wanted to be part of Russia again. So I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe
Chechnya, not
he
sorry,
just
the
wants,
Luhansk and this area of Donbas region.
yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe a regime change. But I don't know if you would have thought that could he conquer the whole country, because does that even happen nowadays? Like, I mean, it's such a big country, you know that would never, that would just turn into an endless guerrilla warfare. How would you, it would just be
Yeah,
Afghanistan.
even
I mean, no one
I think
is
he
like
just
stepping up
wanted
to
to
help
scare
Ukraine
them.
right now. Like, if anyone steps in, because technically, since Ukraine isn't part of the EU and they're not part of NATO, and you can't like start attack, like the NATO countries can't start attacking unless an actual NATO country gets attacked. So he knows that like no one is going to start World War III and play with Russia, especially since if you think about like the top military countries, it would probably be like
Second
obviously the
largest.
US,
Yeah.
yeah, the US, China, Russia, right? So
Yeah.
out of
US,
those two, he's
China,
already got
I'll tell
China
India,
on
I'll
his
tell you
side.
I'll tell you what was
US,
hilarious
Russia,
is when they
Japan.
tried to you know, in the UN Security Council tried to pass a resolution, and Russia's like, well, have you guys forgotten
Vetoed it.
I'm sitting here? So Russia
That was
goes,
so
well,
stupid.
we veto it. It's like, well, of course they're a
My
permanent
God.
member state. Like, of course they're gonna
UNSC
veto
is so stupid. Like it is so stupid. Like when I saw this, I was like, why?
that was
Why would you
so,
do this?
that was so silly.
Such
Like,
a waste of
I
time.
thought they're like, okay, Russia, we want to ban Russia. Yeah, do you agree? Do you agree? No, you
Russia
don't
didn't
agree.
agree.
No surprise there. And I do think that the you know the huge, the Schadenfreude that people are feeling, this kind of joy, because I see people that there is this joy being felt, but just as he mentions, like people don't want to admit that they're feeling joy, so they will give other reasons. But I feel that the joy is because one, the you know the hypocrisy which we mentioned, because the hypocrisy of the United States on its imperial matters is kind of, it's so belligerent, and so like it's like whilst the Ukraine thing is going on, they are bombing Yemen with American and UK weaponry. And it's like, whilst this is going on, they are bombing Yemen right now. it's like what, and even Israel had the nerve to condemn Russia, and it's like whilst they're condemning Russia, they are conducting all their operations in Sheikh Jarrah and doing all these things, and they're calling Russia. They're saying that, come on, you should. This is an act of aggression, and you're thinking, what the hell's going on here? And I think the world can see all this, like we mentioned, hypocrisy, the double stand, and they're thinking, and this is what's causing that kind of joy, if we can call it that. But people, obviously, you wouldn't admit that, just as he says in the book, nobody wants to admit that they feel joy at the misery of people, but they would then just give it other terms.
Yeah, they would just call it justice.
Justice,
Even
yeah.
though unjust means.
Yeah. Yeah, even though obviously the people suffering are Ukrainians. So that is obviously a tragedy. War is always a tragedy.
example,
Yeah.
Burma, Myanmar, they did such unquestionable things to Rohingyas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they only got thrown up, so many people were actually like very happy with that.
They got
Given
what,
it,
sorry?
yeah.
They got what, sorry?
The government got toppled down, right? There was a
Oh,
coup,
right, okay,
a
okay,
military coup,
okay.
and they're just killing people left and right. Like they
Yeah.
don't have any money because of the sanctions. So they're like selling organs of people, dead bodies. Like that's how bad they have gone. And Aung San Suu Kyi, she got sentenced to jail, and if she is charged guilty for all of them, she would have like 100 years prison, 200-year prison or something like
Well,
that.
she bloody
So
deserves it. Honestly. I mean,
Schadenfreude.
I guess
That's what it
it's Schadenfreude, but like the atrocity and the kind of blind genocide that's I can never understand how people can
And
witness
most of
this
the
stuff
people,
and just be
no,
okay
most of
with
the
it.
people were like, they supported it. They supporting that was happening.
It's
Like even the
mad.
normal citizens. So many people, felt that, think like, yeah, it had to happen for you. Did stand up for people, now people would stand up for you.
But I guess
So
he does in the is it, I think it's in this book. He does quote the Milgram experiment, doesn't he? With the he does, doesn't he? With the well, basically Milgram was kind of curious that why did the Nazis carry out all their thing, and why didn't they defy the orders? And so when he sets up the experiment with actors and participants where they have to give electric shocks to them for forgetting words, and there's an experiment, and he goes through it as well, but it's a very famous, people type in Milgram's experiment. Now he shows that up to when people were asked, forget people, when psychologists, psychiatrists and psychotherapists and scientists were asked that how do you think the participants would react, and they said overwhelmingly, they all said that they would not, like maybe they might administer some level of shock, but the moment they see the person pleading for, to stop, that people would stop, like, because it's only an experiment. It's not like that. The results shocked them, that it went to, I think 60% of people, over 65 maybe percent of people continue to administer the shock right to where it said fatal. Eve, on some account, I think on one account, the person, or on a few accounts, the person pretended to have died. Like the participants like went all quiet and you couldn't hear anything. And on some accounts, the researchers had to come in and stop these participants by saying, I think you need to stop. That they were getting that carried away in administering the bloody shock. And you think, what, the human mind, oh my God, like it is scary to think that we could become like that, because Freud, like he says that humans are far more kind of like compassionate than they think, that they're far better than they think, but they're much more kind of monstrous than they can imagine. That we are much, we like given a choice, like in a cold scenario, we would say that, nah, we'd never do these things. But damn, it's scary to think how low people kind of spiral. But yeah.
Does that speak to the fact, Mufti, that Schadenfreude is definitely an emotion? Because in the experiment that you're talking about, that's clearly an emotional response. They're not thinking about it rationally. They're not thinking it through. And even going back to the whole Russia thing, when people, talking about Muslims or putting nasheeds on Putin walking down wherever, isn't that purely an emotional response,
Yeah, it is, yeah.
because of whatever Western aggression from all these years and so on and so
Yeah.
forth? And until this day, we've got Muslims, I don't want to use the word idiots, but they are, who support the Holocaust, who support what Hitler did because it was against Jews, which, once again, they're not thinking this through rationally. I mean, if you're against imperialism, which you should be, then be against imperialism, whether it's done by the West or whether it's done by whoever else. Even if it's done by a Muslim, you should be
It's
against
called
imperialism.
convenientism. It's called convenientism.
Wow.
As long as it's
Exactly.
convenient.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, Fazila. Yeah, that's so. And I totally agree with you, Mustaqim, that it's not a rational computation. It's just an emotional, kind of reaction that when people, like, they've seen this kind of hypocrisy from, let's say, the Western countries. They've seen how they've, let's say, robbed resources from the Muslim world. They've seen how they don't help, like, don't help in Yemen, don't help in Gaza, in Palestine, don't help in Afghanistan, don't help. And then they've seen them kind of crippled, and it serves this, and you're right, it's just emotional. That's all it is. And this is where you can understand where that part is coming from, because as he explains in the book, that I think he gives the Tiger Woods example, where he says where somebody, he takes these, like, he says all these remarks about Tiger Woods and takes pleasure in his kind of scandal, and then he highlights that, but Tiger Woods had made a remark about him a few years ago or something about his performance, saying, well, and he says, given that situation, it's hard to feel that he wouldn't feel Schadenfreude now, that, because when somebody has in some way, even if they've not hurt you, they've hurt your reputation or hurt your identity, because, like, okay, being Muslim is an identity as well as a faith. So people feel, this is our identity, and these people are also a part of us, even though they're different ethnically. And so everybody's attacking them and nobody seems to care. And so it's difficult not to feel Schadenfreude from that element, even though from a rational perspective, from a cool perspective, you'd think, well, no, people are being injured and war, and this is, obviously the innocent, as always, are kind of suffering. But yeah, it is,
And when we see this whole thing happening in Ukraine, like, people are opening up their borders, everyone is reporting it. People are like, why aren't you reporting it? But that's the thing. It's because they are their people. They are similar.
But the racism is just pouring out.
racism.
It's like, like, I shared a few things on my Insta story. I mean, I'm like, what the hell's, like, the guy, some guy who is saying, what really hurts me is to see blonde-haired and blue-eyed people being killed, and you're thinking, what the is this guy? Not that there's, obviously that's tragic, but just seeing people getting killed is tragic. Why do they have to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed? And the guy saying it isn't even blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and you're thinking, okay, you're right. That must be the mother of all tragedies. And all these brown people getting killed, it doesn't matter because they're not blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And there's there's a few reporters that have now openly been saying. One lady said, to say it bluntly, because they said, well, there was they said there was a refugee crisis 5 years ago, and and you weren't so welcoming. And she goes, well, to say it bluntly, this is different. They're not from Syria. They're not from they're white people. They're Christians. And you're like, what the hell? It's like it's just pouring out, and you're like, it's madness. And you're saying this on TV. You're saying this publicly. Like, this is like, it's not even a hidden behind closed doors. You're saying this on national TV that, oh, yeah, oh, it's
But that's
because they.
Poland, right? That's Poland. What can you expect?
But you had other people, even in, I think, was it, who was the one saying this was was he British, or who's the one saying these are relatively civilized? Where he said this is
Yeah,
not
these are
like Iraq.
relative.
He said this is not like Iraq or Syria. This is like a relatively civilized part of the world. And you're thinking, cha cha cha. It's like, it's like those are just animals that live over there, because it's. I mean, you see, it's in times of these things. I guess like Schadenfreude being a hidden kind of emotion, subconscious, a Freudian slip as well, like people letting out certain things when they.
Just like, see, what I feel is just like the people over there, though it's wrong, it is very wrong, giving your race and, people like you
Yeah.
more preference. But even people who are supporting Putin,
Yeah.
they're doing the same. They're giving the lives of their religion people like more preference. They're like when they were killed, so now it's okay for Putin to kill, a bunch of Europeans or like to invade a European country. So I think people have a soft spot for people who like
Yeah.
look like them, like for
Yeah.
example, we are
No,
from
that is
Indian
true.
subcontinent, so we have a soft spot for them
No, I get that.
because
No,
it's not
I
the same culture.
I do get. No, I get the, because there is, this, but the problem with that is it is clearly racist. Like I get
Yeah,
the.
it's racist.
It's like it's clearly racist. Like I get the fact that people may, it's like
I
they
wish
say in some of these things.
even if our Muslim countries were even, half as, look, not racist, but more like, concerned about people like them, it wouldn't be in such a big problem. Because
Yeah.
what I see is that Europe is, like, full on trying to help, like send them weapons, do this, do fight this and that. I wish this happened when,
With
our countries were
within
trouble.
people had that like you're right, there isn't it's interesting that there's a world commission, isn't there, of the Muslim countries, OIC or something, I think it's called. It's got like 50 member states, but they something Islamic something, but it's pretty much redundant. I don't think they really do anything
Like all the
effective.
refugees from these countries, it's pretty sad that they have to like run to Europe. Like they can't even run to these Muslim countries. Like even if they get refuge in a place like Jordan, they are not allowed to work there. They cannot work in that country. They have to stay like refugees over there. So if they go to Europe, they can actually work there.
Because
Then they work, and then they're not able to mix and all, and then
because
it
there
creates
is an
problems.
open, there is
Yeah.
at least a public declaration of the sovereignty of rights, and that we are all, like, we have these inalienable rights. Like this is, it's like a sovereign kind of, it's like sacred, this thing. Whereas really, and in many ways, like the ayah of the Quran that qumu lillahi, that be shuhada, like qawwamina bil qist, that shuhada lillah, that you are these people who stand for justice, that you testify for truth. But walau ala anfusik, even if it's against yourself or people who are near and dear to you, against them, like that justice. And this other verse which really, and I tried to share that to the person, that Allah says, la yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin ala an la ta'dilu, that at times you will have enmity, but don't let it sway you from being just, because it's natural. In fact, shana'an is more than enmity. It's like like animosity, and like proper, like you hate someone. And it's natural, like this book, like when you hate someone, you want to see them fall. But just don't fake the thing. Like, be still. Don't let it sway you from being just. Because it's natural, you want to see the person hurt, but still be just as well. Like that's, I think, I think that ties into what, was it Mustaqim? I think you were saying about the emotion of hate. And I think you were saying it earlier on, because I've always felt that, maybe if we got so deep down at a very core, I don't know if I can call it almost at a metaphorically at a quantum level of the emotions, the kind of substrate of emotions. So we go under in emotions. I feel that love and hate ultimately is kind of the same source, maybe, but it kind of channels, like the strength of these emotions is like maybe it is one thing kind of being channeled through different manifestations, and you see that sometimes in a love-hate relationship with something or with some, like, and how sometimes strong love can turn to sheer hatred, and like it can, and it turns so strong. Like you have some people that could totally love each other and they could totally hate to the death each other, and maybe because at a base substrate level that these emotions are ultimately different manifestations of the same thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or is it just probably too late and I'm
I just think
you're like,
hate is the absence of love. That's what I feel.
absence. Okay, sure. I mean that's
I mean, you spoke about this, was it a couple of weeks ago? Enantodromia is what
yeah,
it's
in
called.
antiodromia, yeah,
Everyone
in antiodromia, yeah.
has a
The
potential for their opposite,
yeah,
right?
that
Something
things
like
have the potential, they carry the potentials for their opposite. And yeah, and I felt that maybe these things at a deep level, the sheer emotion, like removed from, is maybe the same thing, but kind of coming up, obviously
Yeah,
metaphorically coming up. Yeah.
I feel like for both love and hate, like you need to have like a very strong connection. Like, you know, like you
Intensity.
can just yeah, like you can just say that I dislike that person.
Yeah.
But in order for you to like hate that person, you have like a very strong connection, like a very intense passion like against them. It's just like channeled differently. It's channeled in a negative way, but you're still
Yeah.
obsessing over it, spending all your time, your
That's,
energy. They're in your head, like, and love is just the same way, but like in
yeah.
a positive way to me.
Because it's so true what you're saying, and it's interesting that I cited this, that generally right throughout the Quran, Allah does not ever say about him hating. He just says he does not love such and such. He does not love such and such. La yuhib. He doesn't love. He doesn't love. Same thing
so
that
it's
you're
on
saying
the
about the
scale of
word.
zero. Like it's not on the scale of negative. It's like
Yeah,
the scale
because
of
it's kind
zero.
of like,
Like
yeah, it's kind
neutral.
of, yeah, bringing this, like saying that, you know, okay, doesn't, but it's not as, like the intensity in hatred is just like, whoa. Yeah. Well, guys, I think, you know, we've kind of discussed quite a bit. We've gone from the definition, Schadenfreude, right through the book, discussing all these very interesting themes of humiliationment, envy, the causes, the just world kind of theory, real life applications to an analysis and evaluation on Tinder Swindler, and then the Ukraine crisis. I think we're actually doing it. You know, we can actually, this could, I think we need to be commissioned for greater projects. We covered quite a substantial amount in that. So yeah, I know we've gone on, so we'll wrap this up. People,
Mufti,
yeah,
I'd like to end off on a
of
quick
course.
question, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah. So in the book, there is mention of downward comparisons and upward comparisons, and that reminded me of the hadith. I don't know how sahih it is. That's why I'm asking you. That if you're going to compare yourself to people, compare yourself to people who are lower than yourself. So, okay, first of all, you can comment on how sahih that hadith is and looking at the Arabic of it. So, when the Prophet ﷺ is allegedly commanding us to compare ourselves to those lower than us, is this stemming from a place of knowing that human beings are going to compare anyway, but if you compare downwards, you're going to feel less crap about it. Whereas if you compare upwards, that's just opening the doors for envy and, you know, making yourself feel bad about yourself above all else. And, you know, in the book, they mentioned about going as far as the Holocaust even.
Yeah, like I thought. Wait there, I'll have to double check the hadith, but I thought the hadith was about that when you like basically it was from a perspective that when you were looking from a perspective of deprivation, and you're looking from a perspective of prosperity, it was different. So in some cases you looked up, and in some you looked down. So it was like, well, if I'm thinking, oh my God, this person, like, oh my God, I'm suffering in life, and I haven't got stuff. Then if you did a downward comparison and you saw, well, actually I'm so much better than all these people, like I'm better off, it kind of brought back a sense of gratitude. And if it was from the other perspective, it was in the other rank. I thought that's what the hadith, that's the kind of thing coming to my mind, but I'll double check if there's something in a different way. But I think you're right that human beings will always inevitably compare, that it's impossible not to. We will always compare. And there's
There's a
nothing.
question I
Yeah.
want to ask.
Yeah.
Like, it just came up in my mind when we were talking about jealousy. So, as you said, that we always compare. So, and we were also talking about why Muslims are supporting, so many of them, not all of us, are supporting Russia. So generally, there is a lot of thing in which where Muslims, they compare themselves to the Western ideal, and then they say, yeah, they have all this freedom and everything, but look, they are depressed, they don't have stable families, and they're single mothers, things like that. Is it coming out of jealousy? Is it coming out of envy?
That's a good point. I mean, I think that actually ties into a lot of what we were saying in the book. I think it's definitely from a sense of what he discusses in the book about where you feel this kind of, you're making this comparison of superiority and inferiority. And when you see, so he gives the examples of when somebody comes in to a job interview, and there's obviously staged, and the person comes in all of a sudden so looking the part and carrying these extra degrees, and now seeing that person mess up, and even if he didn't see him mess up, the impact it had on the person, because you automatically you feel that, I'm competing against. But when you see loss, it brings back your sense of like it kind of compensates, doesn't it? Because if I feel that, look, I'm suffering and these people have got all of this, and then I just feel even worse about myself. But if all of a sudden that person gets, let's say somebody starving, and here's a millionaire and multimillionaire, and he's like, or living his life, and now this person's thinking, I can't even feed my kids, this isn't fair. And then all of a sudden that person, let's say that neighbor, gets cancer. Now, even though that's such a horrible thing, but he's like, in here, he's kind of arguing, well, it would be difficult to argue that this person doesn't feel some sense of schadenfreude, because he feels that, it's not whether he'll admit it or not. Like, maybe he might justify it by saying, well, he should have taken better care of himself. Who told him to smoke all those cigarettes? Or like, we might, we might buttress it by some kind of excuse or just world. Like, we might say, well, maybe he exposed himself to all these things, and therefore, and like, we find reasons to justify it. But I think it's that emotion, isn't it, which is tied to a sense of envy. It is tied to a sense of kind of and even in envy, he says, it's interesting, he says that envy is like in seeing. He says envy, like it's he says it in the book as well, that the derivatives of the etymology of the word. So and that's a different discussion, which obviously is a long one, but it's interesting that people from there get this understanding of even, the ayn and nazar, and because they saw that people, that envious eye, that people coveting something. And so, yeah. So I agree with what you're saying, that there definitely must be, as human beings, we must feel a sense of at some level, when people have it better than us, whoever they are, whether it's the, let's say, Western countries, Europe compared to the Middle East, or compared to Muslim countries or African countries, or whether it's people even, it could even just be other people. When they have it better than us, it's a fact that there's something about that seriously disturbs us. And to the extent that, there's I don't think he mentions it in this book, but there's the kind of an experiment that that people, researchers have conducted, famous experiment, kind of zero-sum game, where they would have, let's say, participants and say, well, if they were to put down, let's say, there's a high number, let's say $100,000 or £100,000 in this, whatever, this kind of suitcase, and you two sitting here have to, like, basically you can walk out with it, but there's a condition that you say, so one of you gets to say how much percent the other one gets, and if he agrees, then, like, but if he disagrees, like, none of you get anything, or if he agrees, you walk out with it. Now, in those cases where a person said, now you might think of somebody who say 50, and only one person gets to choose. Like, so it's like, let's say he asks me, how much do you want to give that person? How much percent? Now, if I said 10%, and several, they did say 10%. Now, think about it. You are going to walk out £10,000 richer than when you walked in. But if you say no to it, we both lose it. In most of the cases, that person would say no and make us both lose it. Now, that's irrational, because you would have walked out £10,000 richer than when you walked in. But you would be happier to know that I too lost it, rather than be disadvantaged. And this is what most of the participants scored like that. It would have had to be close to about 30% for them to accept it. They found at least, between 20, even though it's irrational, like me walking out with £15,000, but I would rather you lost £85,000 than you give me such a disadvantaged share. Like, I think, why on earth do you give me 15,000? Like, when you get 85, no, we both lose it. This kind of zid that insan has, this kind of like obstinance, that no, like stubbornness, that, how dare you? Like, you know what? We're both gonna suffer. It's comical, isn't it? It's humorous almost. It's like a child, but it's like a grown-up version of a child. I guess we never lose certain traits.
Yeah, one of the, I think chapter 4 was about self-another, and that sort of similar thing about competitions. So it was like, obviously you're in the competition to see do the person lose, rather than yourself sometimes. But yeah, that's just,
and he quotes, I think, Patton as well, General Patton, that the objective of war is not to die for your country, but to see the other guy dies for his. Guys, you know what? This has been epic. I really enjoyed this. I'm really grateful for you guys taking out the time. I know it's been quite a month and some fun reading. We will have hopefully an interesting book for this coming month. I will share it in the Discord group. It's I think it's called Changing My Mind or something, but it's about somebody's journey, and it's once again, it's a kind of like a learning book. It's got the kind of like how this had the kind of science and stuff in it, but it's centered around psychedelics, I believe, so should be fun and interesting and trippy, people. So once again, shukran, dearly appreciate it. Is there something anybody wanted to add before we just sign off, or are we good to sign off, people? Right, so cool. Okay, we're good to sign off. So guys, those of you that have just tuned in today for the first time, make sure you do like, subscribe, the YouTube, and you know the drill, the notification bell, and the rest of it. And if you want to reach out, you can reach out on Instagram. If people want to participate, I know a few people asked me to participate in the book club. Just very quickly, that it's a very strict commitment. Okay, there's no joking, no messing about. In the sense that you have to read the book each month, and you have to attend the kind of. And as you can see, it takes a lot of time, it takes commitment from the participants. It's not kind of, flapping around kind of stuff. You have to commit to it, and it takes a lot, and it is quite a commitment. So, usually these books are probably 250 pages, 200 pages, something like, at least that kind of mark. And so if a person feels that they can do that, they can commit every month, they can definitely participate, which they must, then they can reach out to me on Instagram. And what I'll do is, or you can reach out to Lee Kadan, which is spelled Leigh Kadane. She kind of, she wasn't here today because she's having some surgery, but she will kind of administrates the whole kind of book lounge thing. So cool, people, do that. Till then, rest of you, much love to all of you. Take care, and team, inshallah, see you all soon, and we'll speak on the Discord. Right, have a good night, people. Salamullahi alaikum